Well everyone, I've just ridden 20k over to come pick up the SL8 and I've just ridden over on my SL7, so it gives me a good chance to compare the old generation to the new generation. Very exciting, let's get into it. If you haven't watched any of these videos before guys on my bike reviews, I'm going to have a big list of 10 categories. These are subjective categories that I'm going to be ranking the bikes in, so you can get a good idea of how each bike compares. SL8 in hands now, and I gotta say, let's see what the differences are. If you want to see a comparison in the tube shapes from the old SL7 to the new SL8 here, I already have a video out for that. I'll link it in the description below, and I'll also put a little card up here as well. So I've got to say, I'm not expecting much. I mean, the SL7 is already such a brilliant all-round bike, so let's see if this really is different. Everyone I speak to that has the SL8, they do say it is better than the SL7. It's just objectively better, so let's find that out for ourselves. Well, I'm towards the end of my ride here. We just finished up Box Hill today, and I want to talk about the handling here. So the handling on this bike, I'm not going to say it's any better than the SL7, and that's a positive because the SL7, you can just place the bike wherever you want to, but it does feel marginally more nimble, and I think it's that stiffer front fork. You can just feel like you can pinpoint that placement around the corner wherever you want to. And of course, this is the UK. The road's about as smooth as a teenager's pimply face. You're always, even halfway through the turn, you're always dodging potholes and stuff. And this bike will just let you do it. It's not like the air road where once you've chosen your line, it wants to stay there. It will let you go around those corners and change position midway through the corner on this bike. So super versatile, super nimble. And I think that slightly stiffer front end really works for it. When it comes to leaning the bike over, I said like the Trek Madone doesn't want to lean over as far as the SL7, but this one, you can really lean the bike over if you want to, just like the SL7. So if you want to corner hard, even on like ride number 1, you can get that bike far over on the side of those wheels. So really positive, 10 out of 10 on the handling. Still the best handling bike I've ever ridden. When you're cornering, or well, when you inevitably brake a little bit too late into that corner, well, this bike is very forgiving for that. It just has more to give, it just has more turn, it just has more lean over than you ever think. And it's just very positive. It's a forgiving bike in the corners. Just very briefly on wind stability here, the bike has like very slim tubes, especially towards the rear end of the bike, and honestly you can't feel the wind at all on this thing, especially with those Roval wheels. Even though it's 50mm deep on the front, it's very U-shaped and it just has hardly any effect when the wind touches it. I will say I am a heavier guy at 85 kilos, so it will have less effect on me than a smaller person, but the Specialized is very well designed here for wind stability. Let's talk about the climbing, because this bike climbs really well, and I'm going to kick it off about in the saddle. And as I spoke about that propulsive feeling when you're in the saddle on the flats and stuff, it does translate to the climbs here. You can feel that stiffness going through the bottom bracket in a positive way. It doesn't feel like it's made the bike any less comfortable. They've kind of only added like lateral stiffness, and yeah, it just makes every pedal stroke feel like you're going forwards up the hill. When we talk about climbing out the saddle on this bike, this is where it really shines compared to the SL7 and quite frankly to any other bike I've ever ridden. The way I'm going to describe it, this is going to sound weird to begin with, but it's like a shark. So a shark has like a stiff upper body on the front half here, and then the second half, like from the rear triangle onwards, it flexes more, but it kind of gives you this like whip that kind of just pushes you up the hill, like as if like you're swimming, like you're doing butterfly underwater kick, like a shark flapping its tail. It gives you more propulsion from this whip on the back half. So front half super stiff, this rear triangle kind of seems like it flexes in the right way, and I think that comes from the Athos design. So from like here down to the back there, it's a Specialized Athos, and they've just copied the exact same carbon layup and tube shape. So out the saddle, this thing is amazing for climbing. Well, we've got to talk about the sprinting on this bike, and wow, I described the Trek Madone as electric. This is Electric, wow. I think that shark effect is coming into play where you get that kind of like extra whip that really propels you forwards on the bike. Every single pedal stroke, it feels like you can just do what you want with this bike. You can throw it wherever you want to. You can pull on the handlebars as hard as you want. And I think that stiffer front end really pays dividends when you're pushing the pedals as hard as you can. You can really yank on those bars. I've just been having a bit of fun coming down like the fast like flats and the rolling sections, and this bike feels like the SL7, like it's a fast bike on the flats and the rolling, but you can't say it feels like a time trial bike like you can with the Trek Madone and the Canyon Aero. Like it just doesn't have that, you know, that hardcore whoosh as you're going really fast. Like I said, it doesn't feel any slower at all. It just doesn't feel like a time trial bike. Better than the SL7? No, about exactly the same. Still very fast on these sections though, so don't let what I've just said deceive you on how fast the bike goes along these flats. Just like the SL7, the Aero, the Madone and stuff, if you're kind of going 40 k's an hour, if you drop the wheel or you just want to add a few k's an hour on, the bike will let you do that. You just push, get your head down, and it just allows a lot of speed, this bike. Lets you go faster, it feels like it wants to go faster. Couple of things to report on the comfort. Compared to my SL7, I would say the front end I feel more vibration through, interestingly, but the rear end I feel less vibration coming through. So I think this is down to a couple of things. First of all, for the rear end, I believe that skinnier seat post is probably absorbing a bit more of those vibrations. It's making it more comfortable. For the front end, I believe that there's two factors coming into play. We're running 26 tires on this one, so your standard Specialized turbo cottons. They're a little bit narrower, a little bit higher pressure, which will have a factor to play. But the second thing is, when I'm out the saddle on this bike and you're really pushing the power down, you don't hear that front disc rotor rub from the fork flex. So I think it's a stiffer fork on this one, because pretty much any bike that I personally get onto, I hear the fork flex and I can hear that front disc rotor rub, that every time you're out the saddle. But yeah, it doesn't happen on this bike. So I also think it has a stiffer fork than the previous generation. Well, let's talk about the comfort on this bike. We've done over 120k now, and to be fair, it's just as comfortable as this bike. Even with, it's got a 26 tire on there at the moment, and even with that, it's just as comfortable as that one. And I think that's that AFOS bottom part to the frame down there that really kind of adds to those comfort levels, because the AFOS is a very comfortable bike. So very positive for me. Even on a skinnier tire, it feels the same as my SL7. So it's going to rank high. I mean, I could spend all day on this thing. And I think that's one of the good positives about modern day race bikes, that they are becoming more comfortable. I mean, the pros, they're designed for the pros, they're designed to go fast, but they're designed to be ridden for 5-6 hours straight. On this thing, easy, 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 easy. First thing you really notice on this bike is, well, the most visceral thing you get from the bike, and that is the weight of it. You pick it up and straight away, I mean, I don't know if it is lighter than my Tarmac, but it feels lighter in the hands. Let's wait till we get to the hills to figure that out. The frame is so light. Obviously, a bike is a total of all its components. This one has Dura-Ace on, so it still feels like, viscerally, when you pick the bike up, it does feel light. When you're sprinting underneath you, sometimes it almost feels like the front wheel wants to lift. It's so light. Going around the corners, it's so light, just turning it in. You can just put it where you want to, and such a positive having a frame this light. And it's beautiful. It's literally, it's like the perfect climbing bike, but it goes very, very fast as well. Love the weight of this thing, 10 out of 10. How they've made a bike this light with the same aerodynamics as the SL7, I don't know. God, this bike has energy, and it has energy in spades. When it comes to the fun factor, it's fun everywhere you go on this bike. You're going fast, you're going uphill, you're going downhill, you're working on tight, twisty corners. It will just do what you want it to do and go where you need it to go. And you could just play with the bike everywhere you go. So I mean, I didn't think this was going to be the most fun bike in the world compared to like the Madone or the Aero, but wow, energy in spades, and I love it. 10 out of 10. Tom, what would Federico say? Exactly. One thing I've got to say on the looks here on this bike, has really grown on me, the attractiveness of this bike. Still no way near as good as the SL7, but one thing I do hate is the beluga whale. They call it the speed sniffer, still a rubbish name, but the only time that this bulge, this package looks good is when this whole stack is slammed. So if you're not as flexible, or if you're like me, you've got enough seat posts sticking out already, it doesn't look as good. You just got to get rid of this on this bike, and I think that really hampers it a little bit on the attractiveness front. Let's talk about that shop window factor. Do you look at yourself in the shop windows as you go past? And you do a lot, but mainly because it says S-Works on it. I actually find myself looking in more shop windows on my bike over there. I think it might be a little bit due to the colour. You don't see the black as much. But it is also the frame shapes. Like when you ride the Madone and when you ride the Aero, talking about the Gen 7 Madone there, people look at you all of the time. People just always look, they turn their heads, they look at the bike. Doesn't happen as much on this bike, so it is going to get a lower score for that. Well, of course, it is pretty much mostly positives about this bike, but there is one thing this bike cannot hide from, and that is its retail price. I mean, this one comes in at £12,000, and I'm going to back Specialized up a little bit here, not to £12,000 though. They are the market leaders in design. Whatever Specialized do, everyone else copies. They're the first ones to make an aero bike as light as this, and guess what? Everyone else is doing the same. Trek have followed it. Most other brands will probably follow it in the future, and it is the way to go. Like one bike to do it all. It's much nicer. You don't have to think about which bike am I going to ride today. This bike is just amazing everywhere. But for that £12,000, still expensive, and I will not defend that. Well guys, after riding them both back to back, would I sell my bike for this bike? The answer is no. So it is marginally better. Like I said, it sprints just a little bit better. Out the saddle, it climbs just a little bit better. But this bike is already so damn good. It's not worth justifying the money to go to this. If you were just buying straight into the Specialized brand, so you don't have an SL7, probably go for this one straight away because it is a better bike. But it's not that much better. It's not worth the money to upgrade it. So I'm going to stick with my guy right here. So like I just mentioned, like if you want to ride this bike, it does everything you ever need it to do. And I think it's the way forward. Just buy a bike that does everything. You can enjoy it more. You don't have to think about where you're riding on the day. It's just electric everywhere you go on this thing. You can have so much fun. And well, I am a bit of a Specialized fanboy because the bike's so good. Not a fan of their prices though, but I could not recommend this bike more. Here are the final scores for the bike, and as you can see, the SL8 excels at pretty much everything it does. It is let down by a few things, like first of all, that shop window factor only gets a 7 out of 10, because when you've got the stack on there on the front end, it does really reduce the attractiveness of the bike. It's not very pretty. Also, I believe it doesn't come with the most beautiful paint jobs, this SL8, so I think they've had better ones in the past. When it comes to the flats and rolling, like I said, it probably is almost as fast as things like an Aero and stuff like that, but it just does not feel like a time trial bike, so it doesn't feel like you have as much speed. Then finally, it is let down a little bit by the cost there. It's a very, very expensive bike, this one, even if you're buying the lower models. I will argue that you will only have to buy one bike, so instead of two bikes, you don't have to have a climbing or an aero bike. This does it both, so that makes it a little bit cheaper, but it's still not great. Well everyone, there's my review. That's how the bike rides when I've ridden it. That's what it feels like to ride. If I've missed anything out at all, feel free to ask me in the comments. I pretty much reply to all of them. If you don't want to do it on there, you want to ask me privately, you can ask me over here on Instagram and I'll respond to pretty much everything. Guys, I've been Jason. This has been Cycling Unboxed. See you in the next video.